What do I want to do? Most of all, I want to have teachers teaching at the most effective levels they possibly can. It's exactly what they want. We have precisely the same goals. We want the very best teaching for our kids that we can have. There are some things I can do to assist them in that. A big part of what I do as a school administrator is be another pair of eyes and ears in the classroom. While they're very busy teaching and keeping up, I can be that observing eyes and ears to help feed them what I saw going on in the classroom.
What goes inside the quotation marks? What's actually being said? Okay.
There are as many different ways to teach as there are teachers.
That looks pretty good. Got it all on there.
But one thing teachers have in common is a desire to be even better at what they do. Working alone in classrooms, teachers rarely get another perspective on their teaching.
Observation can definitely help a teacher grow. I believe we always have room for improvement, and that there are other ways of doing something other than the way we do it year after year after year, or class after class after class.
Information that can help a teacher grow seldom comes from a formal evaluation. Objective data about the class can be useful to supervisors, but even more valuable to teachers themselves.
That was much better. You were asking really pertinent questions quickly, too. Every time I've had someone come in and observe me for that purpose, I found at least a few really helpful things that were very easy to implement.
When trusted colleagues observe classroom activities non-judgmentally and share the data with teachers, it's like giving them another set of eyes.
Right behind you, Jason.
Two of the most important things we do every day are listen and observe. But we don't always hear what is said or see what's going on, often because we don't know what to look for. In this videotape, we'll show you 6 ways you can go into a classroom, record what's happening, and come out with specific, objective data you can later share with the teacher.
There's some nice working groups of kids that work together well.
Each observation technique focuses on a different type of classroom activity. Some let you concentrate on what teachers or students say. For example, how the teacher responds to students' answers.
And he certainly didn't foresee the ability of the land to produce more. I agree with you.
Some let you focus on what they do, how the teacher moves around the classroom, or how well the students stay on task. Other techniques let you analyze both words and actions to see the patterns of interaction between teacher and students. All are designed to gather non-judgmental data. Which one you choose for any particular classroom observation depends on the type of information you and the teacher think would be most useful. With the help of Keith Atchison of the University of Oregon, we'll explain each technique and show how to use it in actual classrooms. The trainer's manual provides additional information on the appropriate use of the techniques, and a second tape has classroom episodes you can use for practice. To introduce each observation technique, we'll show part of a class and ask you to write down your impressions. Then we'll explain a specific technique and apply it to the same class.
From you.
We'll begin with this high school European history lesson. As you watch, jot down some ideas that you can share with a partner later.
What were some of the inventions? What were some of the changes happening in European life to create a new type of society? Can you come up off the top of your head with any examples of changes in how goods were transported, how things were being produced? What were some of the developments happening in the first half of the 19th century? Jerry?
One of the larger developments would be mass production and the factory system, where now instead of people like doing the cottage type work or the limited shops, they're getting a lot of people in one locale making a lot of the same product on a large scale to make more products available to the public cheaper.
The focusing, the centralizing of the productive process in a factory. Good. Okay.
Also, there was the railroad, which linked the entire European continent together and made transportation of goods available to all people.
The rapid transportation of goods, railroads being key in that. Were there any other ways which goods were being transported more rapidly than they had once been able to? John?
Canals were being built and boats were becoming a mode of transportation for goods.
Okay, improvement of roads. A new type of road, the Macadam Road, named after Macadam, in which, you know, was
Now take a minute to stop the tape and share your impressions with a partner. You may have found that your notes reflect a variety of things happening in the classroom. Keith Atchison, our observer in this class, will give us a way to screen out other activity and concentrate on just what is being said.
What teachers and students say to one another has a major effect on the learning process. So, an important skill in teacher observation is the ability to listen and record what is being said in a classroom situation. With the observation technique we call selective verbatim, the teacher and observer select an aspect of the class discussion to focus on, such as just the teacher questions or the student responses.
In a way, they took the market.
When you know you're interested in a particular aspect of verbal behavior, you can concentrate on the words in that category and write them down verbatim.
what happened to this optimism of the 18th century? With Malthus, it is a gloomy.
To be sure to catch everything, including the and ahs, it's helpful to use an audio tape recording as a backup to your notes. This technique will be especially useful to our history teacher, who is interested in knowing how his questions are worded. Now we'll watch the class again and write down only his questions.
What were some of the inventions? What were some of the changes happening in European life to create a new type of society? Can you come up off the top of your head with any examples of changes in how goods were transported, how things were being produced? What were some of the developments happening in the first half of the 19th century? Jerry?
One of the larger developments would be mass production and the factory system, where now instead of people like doing the cottage type work or the limited shops, they're getting a lot of people in one locale making a lot of the same product on a large scale to make more products available to the public cheaper.
The focusing, the centralizing of the productive process in a factory. Good. Okay.
Also, there was the railroad, which linked the entire European continent together and made transportation of goods available to all people.
The rapid transportation of goods, railroads being key in that. Were there any other ways which goods were being transported more rapidly than they had once been able to? John?
Canals were being built and boats were becoming a mode of transportation for goods.
Okay, improvement of roads. A new type of road, the Macadam Road, named after Macadam, in which, was different sizes of rocks to create a road that would hold up during heavy transportation. So you would have an all-season road to transport goods over distances, over surface. So we have railroads, we have canals, we have a different construction of roads to have dependable transportation. Brent?
Well, the communication improvement as far as telegraph and telephone later in the century.
Okay. The rapid electronic spread of information. Anybody else? Other things that were happening in terms of industrialization?
They had a larger workforce because children and women were included too, and they're working in the factories along with men.
Okay, the inclusion of women and children into the workforce. Okay, anybody else have anything else they'd like to add? I think we have a pretty complete...
This completed verbatim list of questions gives the observer clear, unbiased information to share with the teacher. From this list, the teacher can see that he occasionally asked multiple questions before giving students a chance to respond.
What were some of the inventions? What were some of the changes happening in European life to create a new type of society? Can you come up off the top of your head with any examples of changes in how goods were transported, how things were being produced? What were some of the developments happening in the first half of the 19th century? What I want is something that's pretty specific and that will allow me to make changes in my behavior. So sometimes it really is helpful to have somebody who's looking at it from an objective, fair-minded way, seeing what is happening from their perspective, because there is so much in a classroom you miss.
There's more to observation than just having the technical skill to record data accurately. Another part of it is to take the kind of data that will be most useful to the teacher. So it involves talking to the teacher before you go in to observe and finding out what the teacher is really interested in knowing, and then delivering that.
If I had an assistant or two, so I need a couple volunteers.
As you watch part of this third grade class, make a few notes about what you see happening.
Okay, how about this one? How is an ant like a wind-up toy that has feet? How is an ant like a wind-up toy that has feet? Sarah?
They march in a row.
They march in a row. Do ants march in a row?
Yes.
When? I want you to all think, when have you ever seen ants marching in a row? How many of you have ever seen ants following each other in a row before? Sheila?
I was going out to my barn and then I saw a bunch of ants marching in a row.
Did they have anything with them?
Mm-hmm.
What?
I can't remember.
Anybody else ever see ants marching in a row? How about Holly?
When I was outside playing, I found a great big line of ants.
What were they doing?
They
just following each other, or did they have anything?
They had some eggs.
Eggs? Oh. I guess my biggest concern is the students and how I'm responding to them and making sure that I'm talking to everyone and that kind of thing. I'm not real concerned about the lessons themselves. They usually are pretty smooth and I feel comfortable with that. It's my interaction with the children that I'm most concerned about.
To give a teacher a broad sense of how class discussions flow, who responds to what, and who's included or not included, we use the technique verbal flow. Both this technique and selective verbatim deal with classroom verbal behavior, but selective verbatim is more concerned with what is being said, whereas verbal flow identifies who said it and to whom.
The verbal flow technique uses arrows on a seating chart to show who the teacher talks to and who replies. For example, if a teacher asks a question of an individual student,
how is that like one of those after-dinner mints? Andy?
We draw an arrow into that student's box on the chart. The head of the arrow points toward the student to show that the question, or verbal flow, came from the teacher to the student. If that student replies to the teacher,
and when you're pushing on the mitt, you can push your finger through.
We draw another arrow in the student's box pointing toward the teacher. If the teacher asks the question of the whole class,
how is a dictionary, you know what a dictionary is, like a large stack of paper?
We draw an arrow from the teacher toward the class. The arrows clearly show who spoke and who responded. We'll use the verbal flow technique with this class to gather specific data for the teacher about whom she called on most frequently.
Okay, how about this one? How is an ant like a wind-up toy that has feet? How is an ant like a wind-up toy that has feet? Sarah?
They march in a row.
They march in a row. Do ants march in a row?
Yes.
I want you to all think, when have you ever seen ants marching in a row? How many of you have ever seen ants following each other in a row before? Sheila.
I was going out to my barn and then I saw a bunch of ants marching in a row.
Did they have anything with them? What?
I can't remember.
I can't remember. Anybody else ever see ants marching in a row? How about Holly?
When I was outside playing, I found a great big line of ants.
What were they doing?
They
Just following each other, or did they have anything?
They had some eggs.
Eggs? Oh, okay. Blake, one more.
When we go down to Palm Springs, we go down there like once every year in the summer. There's usually, there's a whole bunch of ant hills around it, and usually you see these lines crisscrossing around in the park in one section with big leaves on with them.
They crisscross? You mean the path, marching ants go across each other? Do they crawl over each other or just go in between?
In between.
The verbal flow chart for the part of the class we've just seen shows that the teacher focused her questions on the center of the class, and that she often asked the same student more than one question.
Sheila.
I was going out to my barn and then I saw a bunch of ants marching in a row.
Did they have anything with them? What?
I can't remember.
Anybody else ever see ants march? Darby's given me the kind of feedback, generally, that it's been pretty positive. Once in a while, she makes a suggestion that I might change something with the position of a student in the room. Like, I know that I have a tendency to look over the tops of the first row's heads. So she's suggested to me that perhaps instead of having one that's fairly quiet in the front, that I move them a little bit towards the middle so that I don't overlook them.
Make a few notes about what you see happening in this middle school writing class.
I already told you.
Okay, but now we're going to write in sentences. We don't have a written sentences. We just have ideas down here.
A flashlight is sleeping.
That's what you took. Okay, but we're not even worried about that one right now. What did you see? You saw some spider webs? Okay, okay. When I first got to the house, the first thing I saw was this big old spider web, right? Okay.
Wait,
Is that
this
scary?
is starting the whole story over, and this is finishing the story.
Yeah, yeah. At some point, you're going to have to finish the story. And I didn't ask any questions to help you finish the story. That's going to all come from your own head.
But these are the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm. This is the outline, remember?
I see.
Okay, right. No, okay, good. The class that people observe today is one that is often hard to manage. There are kids who don't stay on task very often. There are kids who would rather be joking and laughing around. And I would like to have people be able to point out to me how I can handle that, what kinds of behaviors are actually happening, and what things maybe then in return I can do to change some things to make that a more productive class setting.
When you're busy teaching, it's hard to know who's paying attention. The technique at task provides information that helps answer that question. It shows individual student attention during a class. Are they doing the task the teacher assigned?
To prepare for the at-task technique, the observer needs to know what the teacher defines as at-task behavior for the lesson. For this class, the teacher expects the students to be writing, consulting the thesaurus, or requesting and receiving help. With this information, the observer makes a seating chart and develops a legend. Here he uses an A for actively or overtly at task, P for passively at task, and H for help from the teacher, O for overtly not at task, T for off-task talking, and D for distracted or daydreaming. The observer will use this list to code behavior as he watches each student in turn. Notice that he has numbered 1 to 20 in each student's box because he thinks he'll make 20 sweeps of the class. He has also numbered 1 to 20 at the top of the chart to note the time at which he begins each sweep. Begin by marking the time for the first sweep at the top of the chart. Then start with the front row and watch students individually for 3 to 5 seconds each, and note the student's behavior in his or her box on the chart. When you have finished systematically watching every student in the class, note the time for the next sweep and begin again with the front row. Notice that the observer sits in the front of the room so that he can clearly see what's going on. As we rejoin the class, he is beginning the 10th sweep.
Okay. What did you see when you got close up to the house?
A flashlight, a sleeping bag.
That's what you took. Okay, but we're not even worried about that one right now. What did you see? You saw some spider webs? Okay. Okay, when I first got to the house, the first thing I saw was this big old spider web, right? Okay.
But
Is that
this
scary?
is starting the whole story over, and this is finishing the story.
Yeah. Yeah. At some point, you're going to have to finish the story. And I didn't ask any questions to help you finish that story. That's going to all come from your own head.
But this is the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm. This is the outline, remember?
I see.
Okay. Right. No, okay, good. What I was hoping you would do is think about how you wanted to end your story. Do you have some idea of how you want to end your story?
I have no idea how to start it.
Okay, so that's what we need to do back. First of all, it's partially started right here, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, when you get up to your house, you see blue lights, right, for a porch light.
Yeah.
All right, boarded up windows, that's good, and creaks in the floor. Okay.
Yeah.
Creaks. Well, can we see creaks in the floor?
Let's see. Well, no, I
Breaks
can't.
in the floor, though.
Breaks,
We could see the wood that was kind of, okay, so why don't we talk about what we see first and maybe what we hear, okay? And then we're going to go inside that house, aren't we?
Yeah.
Okay, and what's going to happen when we get inside the house?
We're going to sleep.
Oh,
We're
well,
gonna
you're just going to walk in and crash and go to sleep, huh?
No, I'm going to eventually wake up.
Oh.
I can't think of anything else.
Okay, I said that you could just go with 1 or 2 things. Okay, now, what are you going to do? Okay, what did you first notice when you got up? A doorbell shaped like a skeleton? That's pretty spooky right off the bat, right? Okay, so what kinds of thoughts go to your head, through your head then?
Let's see. I don't know.
Okay, Sean, would you read what you have so far so that, I think everybody's working on a story. Stephanie, would you read what you have so far so that that'll give somebody maybe another idea of how they can get started?
The beginning.
We don't have to read the whole story. Let's just start with So Saturday Night. Everybody has So Saturday Night there.
So Saturday night arrived, and I slowly sauntered up to the Johnson's place. My friends went with me just to make sure I went inside, but they had no intention of joining me. When I first got up close to the house, I noticed that the front door was opening and shutting. There was a shadow running back and forth in front of me. I went inside, and the whole house was furnished. It had really nice furniture, and all the lights worked. I'm glad I brought my lucky teddy bear, though, because it had strange noises going through the house. That's all I've got so far.
Okay.
The seating chart shows that Angelina was at task until the 10th sweep. Then she received help from the teacher. This distracted her neighbor Gabe. The chart also shows that the same behavior was repeated throughout the class whenever the teacher helped other students.
With the information that I got back today, one of the things that I think I learned was that when I go to answer a question for one individual, that actually several people tune into that, which puts them off task. That's something I would work with the observer in this particular case to see what we could do about getting away from that, because I believe that does take them off task, and that's not where I want those students.
Sure. What are you going to use it for?
Yo-yo.
Yo-yo.
Classrooms that have a lot of things happening at the same time present a whole new set of conditions for the observer. For example, what do you notice when you observe this middle school woodworking class?
Looking really nice. Sides look good, yeah. You need a little more on the end grains.
I haven't saved that yet.
Yeah, it shows.
These two fingers.
Those two look good. Yeah. Whoops, there are a few right there, aren't there? Maybe
This isn't what I've been using. I've been using the...
concentrate the pressure of the sander like in a corner of it right on that spot.
Okay.
So you get all the pressure in that one little area and it'll cut down a lot quicker. You were going to start that. I haven't figured out the cost yet, but we can do that. How's the duck man doing? Some chips in there, don't you? Whoops. We're doing about 20 points on those. Maple, huh?
Do I get around to every student and see what they're doing? Or do I, so to say, get trapped by a few, constantly needing help and not making it around to all the students?
In shop classes, science labs, art classes, in any class where physical movement is important to the teacher, the observer needs a way to record that activity. The technique class traffic tracks the path that teachers or students take around the room.
Before the lesson, the observer prepares a seating chart showing the physical layout of the room, including aisles, tables, and equipment. The teacher wants to know how many students he gets around to, so the observer will use a solid line to track his movement and numbers for each time he talks to individual students.
How's the duck man doing?
Other codes could be used to track student movement as well, but for now, we'll just follow the teacher.
Curtis, you cut those boards 3 inches?
I can't get these out. How do I get them out?
Cut those boards 3 inches.
How do I get these out?
Take the hammer and pull.
Oh, yes, I know that, but I can't get them out.
Once, yeah, you can. Put
This one's a hard one.
take a little block of wood and put under the hammer and you'll find they'll pull real easily.
Could I buy 2 of those big wheels from you?
Sure. What are you going to use it for?
Yo-yo.
Yo-yo.
Ready? Well?
Unfortunately, yes, but
Yes?
they're in that cardboard box on that brown cabinet.
Is that enough seating work out on the side?
Looking really nice.
Is that enough on both sides?
Sides look good, yeah. You need a little more on the end grains.
I haven't saved that yet.
Yeah, it shows.
These two fingers.
Those two look good. Yeah. Whoops, there are a few right there, aren't there?
It won't come out. I've been using like the...
Maybe
This isn't what I've been using. I've been using the...
concentrate the pressure of the sander like in a corner of it right on that spot.
Okay.
So you get all the pressure in that one little area and it'll cut down a lot quicker. You were going to start that. I haven't figured out the cost yet, but we can do that. How's the duck man doing? Some chips in there, don't you? Whoops. We're doing about 20 points on those. Maple, huh? You know where the maple is?
These would be good nails.
Yeah, number 6s. Those would be about perfect.
There's 4.
Huh?
There's 4.
Oh, I'd probably space them about 4 to 5 inches apart. Better stick with about 4 with that bow to be sure it pulls down.
Just look at this real quick.
Huh?
Should I just... What should I take it off at?
You needed to just... The one that needed to be shortened was this one, or make a new one. exactly the length of this one.
Which one's too long?
The one that was on here was too long.
I took it off. This is clean. I'll put it back.
Don't like it, huh?
How can I measure it?
Okay, it's got to be the same as this one.
What's
You need
that?
one 11.5 plus 16.
Yeah.
It was this one that was wrong.
Okay, so now I need
One exactly the same length as this.
11.5 and a 16.
Okay.
The teacher's class traffic pattern for just 3 minutes of the class shows that he has already reached at least 10 of his students.
You want a little help? You got a hammer here and some nails?
The more experience that teachers have with specific data collection, the more they're going to use it. Once again, ask teachers, what do you need? What's helpful to you? So maybe a teacher isn't going to ask you, gosh, I'd sure like to see some class traffic, or you know, I've always wondered about that back row, how much they're on task. But maybe you're not surprised with this information. Maybe you are, but I thought it would be helpful. And the teacher can then take that and go, wow, so that's how that works. Or, yeah, that really makes sense to me now.
So far, we've shown you 4 observation techniques, 2 that record what teachers and students say, and 2 that record what they do. The next technique, interaction analysis, gives us a way to look at words and actions, to see the patterns of interaction between teacher and students.
But it's going to happen. Just give me time. Give my principals time.
As we go back to our high school European history class, see if you can tell what the teacher is doing to encourage his students to think for themselves.
Even if the middle class has the means to correct the problem, they necessarily would not want to correct the problem because it's for their financial well-being. Cheaper labor, okay? Michaela.
I saw it as the middle class really forced this population growth.
They forced the population growth. How
These
so?
Families, because children were a part of the working force, lower class families with the low wages and the scarcity of food, they were basically forced to have children because that could add to their earnings.
Oh,
So the more children that they could have working in the factories, the more children that they could have, the more money they could come having to the house.
Resulted in a better chance of survival of the family because wages were
And
so
the middle
low.
class forced that, and the factory owners forced that with the low wages.
So Malthus is not correct. That Sadler report says the abuses may be correctable by the fact that the middle class is creating such conditions that it really is to their betterment. Christy.
Well, I agree with Ms. Shayla, but one of the reasons they're having so many children and the population keeps expanding is because some of those children are not going to live past the age of 8, and they have to keep that steady supply coming in.
I sometimes have to stand back and sort of evaluate myself. Am I doing the same thing day after day? Well, there's still a lot of things you might miss. So an outside observer who's looking at a whole pattern of interactions and can start to see certain patterns develop within that class, or certain things being stressed and other things being ignored, you need to be told that.
Teachers all have patterns of instructing. For example, they may begin with a lecture, ask questions, get answers, praise or criticize those answers, then continue lecturing. The technique interaction analysis helps us see those teaching patterns.
It gives us a way to combine a seating chart and a timeline to record and analyze the nature of teacher and student interaction. To begin, the observer and teacher decide what kind of interaction to look for.
I usually start out by asking, what's the lesson going to be about? And then they talk about the lesson. Then I ask, what are you going to be doing during the teaching? What do you anticipate that the students will be doing? And when I talked to Ron, he was hoping that the students would really be responsive the way he knows they can be. He wanted to know how he was interacting with students. And I suggested to him that I could record when he used their ideas, when he praised their ideas, when he merely acknowledged their ideas. And then he invented a category for me. Part of the praise category is praising or encouraging. I made encouraging into a separate category. That's the thing he was most interested in.
With this information, the observer makes a legend, assigning a letter code to each type of interaction to be observed. He uses capital letters for teacher behavior and lowercase letters for student behavior. In this class, the observer will look for feelings, praise, encouragement, using an idea, student's idea, questions, students reciting facts, lecture, directions, criticism, and antagonism. He will record these on a seating chart and occasionally note the time. Here again, a tape recording could be a valuable backup to your notes. The class is discussing the Malthusian theory of population control. The students in the front are playing roles as members of the middle and working classes in the 1800s. Notice what the teacher does to encourage students to think for themselves, express their thoughts, and test their ideas.
I'm a member of the lower class, and I feel that I am the majority, that there are millions of peasants and millions of the working class, and we are ignorant, or we are, as Scott said, we are not understanding of the middle class. But I feel that is a responsibility of the middle class. And the middle class are the ones that are educated. They're educated about the moral restraint. They're the ones who set the standards of the moral restraint. They're the ones who tell us what our restraints are with our lusts. And they're also the ones who know about birth control. They're educated about birth control, both physical birth control methods and with the restraint, and we aren't. And so I feel that it's the middle class's responsibility to educate us.
And you think, in other words, you think if they just went through the process of education, that you then would understand what was necessary to be done, and you would do it, and then all the problems of society would clear up, the misery would disappear.
Well, I think they're forgetting that we're the majority, that there are a lot more of us than there are of them.
Oh. Is there a veiled threat in that?
No.
Okay.
Let's look at the interaction so far. We began with the student's idea.
And we are ignorant, or we are, as Scott said, we are not understanding of the middle class. But I feel that is a responsibility of the middle class.
The teacher uses that idea, you.
And you think, in other words, you think if they just went through the process of education, that you then would understand what was necessary to be done, and you would do it, and then all the problems of society would clear up.
And the student responds to that with another idea.
I think they're forgetting that we're the majority, that there are a lot more of us than there are of them.
The teacher then poses a question, Q.
Is there a veiled threat in that?
No.
Okay.
And notes the time. As the class continues, we'll show you how the interaction could be coded.
We have 4 opinions here. We have a perspective. Now, I want you to keep for just a second into the position of being in the period 1800 to 1850. Is there anything that you think was misrepresented? Is there anything you would like to expand and develop? Do you have any comments that you would like to say about it? Jeanette?
Well, I agree with Junior and Christine, and it seems pretty obvious.
What's so obvious?
As Scott said, it's the lower classes' own, they bring upon their own misery You know, they're responsible for their own conditions, but they're not, as Dunya and Christine have explained, how they were placed in those factories. And it's pretty obvious that the middle class would not want them educated on or the birth control methods or any type of education, because they can keep them working in those factories at, 16 hours a day. They can keep the children in there. They can control them because they're ignorant and they have no other means of.
The population growth is to the well-being of the middle class.
Yes, it's to their advantage. And it's obvious that they wouldn't want them,
Even if the middle class has the means to correct the problem, they necessarily would not want to correct the problem because it's for their financial well-being.
It's
cheaper labor. Okay. Michaela.
I saw it as the middle class really forced this population growth.
They forced the population growth. How
These
so?
families, because children were a part of the working force, lower class families with the low wages and the scarcity of food, they were basically forced to have children because that could add to their earnings. So the more children that they could have working in the factories, the more children that they could have, the more money they could come having to the house.
Resulted in a better chance of survival of the family because wages were
And
so
the middle
low.
class forced that, and the factory owners forced that with the low wages.
So Malthus is not correct. That Sadler report says the abuses may be correctable by the fact that the middle class is creating such conditions that it really is to their betterment. Christy.
Well, I agree with Michaela, but one of the reasons they're having so many children and the population keeps expanding is because some of those children are not going to live past the age of 8, and they have to keep that steady supply coming in. And with the population that they say keeps increasing in the lower classes, that's only because the need for food, the need for substance, the need to stay alive, that's the only thing they have going for them is their children stay working, because they'll work. I mean, who would a factory owner hire first, a child or an adult? They would hire a child because they could get away with the abuses as a child.
More easily controlled workforce. John.
In Heilbronner's report, he talks about the balance that's struck in nature. And I think that is the working classes.
Before you go any further, what is the balance? What is this balance struck in nature?
Well, basically, the way I'm interpreting it is that the working class has their own way of balancing out. It's in direct proportion to the amount of wages that they receive. When they receive a small amount of wages, then they're not going to have as many kids because those are additional mouths to feed. But when they receive greater wages, then they're going to have more amounts of kids. And that's where the balance in the population comes in.
It's not so much within it, it's...
When you have noted interactions and times on the seating chart, you can graph them on a timeline to see the teaching patterns. To make a timeline, list the behaviors you looked for down the left side and the times in equal intervals across the top. Then plot the behaviors as they happened. The completed timeline for this part of the class shows the teacher's interaction pattern. He questioned students to stimulate ideas. He used their ideas and encouraged them to expand their thinking.
It's pretty obvious that the middle class would not want them educated on or the birth control methods or any type of education because they can keep them working in those factories.
The population growth is to the well-being of the middle class.
Yes, it's to their advantage.
I knew Keith was back here, and I knew he was making, detailed observations on what was happening. It's nice to have somebody come in and say, I'll look at this certain, behavior that you're doing in the class, and I'll give you some feedback on it, and maybe you can make some changes in behavior or make some improvements or what have you.
This technique gives the teacher a timeline showing the interaction patterns, a tape recording of what was said, and a seating chart of who participated. Comprehensive data that can help the teacher when shared appropriately.
I'm hoping that my post-conference with Ron will get into some substantive things. But we'll have something to point to and look at to get that started, rather than being eyeball to eyeball. Teachers tend to be defensive when you just look at them and tell them about their teaching. They feel much more comfortable looking at data.
Yeah.
Psychologically, it's side by side as opposed to nose to nose.
I need to tell you, we only have one. Oh, it's on the other side.
It's time to start.
What do you see happening in this middle school math class?
Yesterday we talked about subtracting fractions. Remember how exciting that was? Take out your fraction notes. We're going to write down what you learned yesterday. Your fraction notes. If you don't have those with you for some reason, start them again on a new sheet. Heidi. Yes.
Autumn.
In this problem, like the one that we worked yesterday, what's the first step? First thing I need to do. Cyrus?
Find an equivalent, yeah.
Right. You want to change these fractions into new fractions that have the same
You
denominator.
multiply 7 times 2, and then 2 times 7.
What denominator are you using?
7 times 2.
This was already a while back. I was having some problems with my class, and just making it gel and making it be as orderly and managed the way that I wanted it to. And I thought that having someone come in who has had a lot of experience in classes could give me some ideas on what things I wasn't doing or could be doing that could help tighten things up.
Sometimes a teacher has no specific concerns, but would like the big picture. General feedback on how the class is going. We call this technique global scan or wide lens.
Unlike the other techniques that let you focus on specific classroom behavior, the global scan technique lets you record everything that happens. Are the students prepared? Do they understand what they're supposed to do? When the teacher turns to the board, do the students goof off? The most commonly used global scan technique is the anecdotal record. The observer writes a series of short, descriptive sentences to document classroom events. The key to using this technique successfully is to remain as objective and non-judgmental as possible. For example, instead of writing, "Students are unruly," you might note, "Willie is out of his seat," or "Mike and Heidi are talking." The teacher's concern about classroom management prompted him to ask a colleague to sit in on the class and tell him what she saw.
Yesterday we talked about subtracting fractions. Remember how exciting that was? Take out your fraction notes. We're going to write down what you learned yesterday. Your fraction notes. If you don't have those with you for some reason, start them again on a new sheet. Heidi. Yes.
I go after her.
In this problem, like the one we worked yesterday, what's the first step? First thing I need to do. Cyrus?
Find an equivalent, yeah.
Right. You want to change these fractions into new fractions that have the same
You
denominator.
multiply 7 times 2, and then 2 times 7.
What denominator are you using?
7 times 2.
Which is?
14.
Okay. You all know how to do this, of course. This was already written vertically, right? But they won't always be. And that's the first thing we need to do. Right. Write the problem vertically. Next up, Vanessa?
You borrow from 24.
Right, you can't take 7/14 from 4/14, so we have to borrow. How do we do that?
1 whole equals 14 14ths. And then plus 4 is 18.
Good. We're borrowing 14/14. There are 4 here already, so that's 18/14. Heidi?
Like when it's 18/14, can you put, see what I do first is I put 1 and whatever it is, 1 and 4/14. And and then I change it to uncommon, improper fraction, so 4 is right there, and then I just drop, and I mean,
That's where we are. You subtract next.
Yeah.
Right. 11/14, right?
Yeah. So do we
No, what she said is she subtracts. No?
Easy though.
Well, isn't subtract the numerator and keep the denominator the same? That's for, like, adding fractions.
Right. This is exactly the same as adding if you look at those steps. The only difference is sometimes you have to go.
Your
No thanks.
And it made me cry.
My tears cried too. My eyes were
I had to relax my
Did you have a
eyes.
question?
Yeah, I do.
I
did. D minus 1 is 2. No. So I feel like it's
Look at what to do right here. See?
I think the anecdotal records that Andy keeps are really useful. I wasn't sure exactly what was going on in the class. When I was facing them, I knew what was going on. Some of the things that she told me were going on, even when I was facing them, were things that I didn't realize. People that I thought were paying attention that weren't really, or people I thought were on task that weren't really. It made me feel like there was a lot more I could be doing to zero in on all the kids and make sure that I was really aware in the classroom.
Each of the techniques we've demonstrated will give you a different way of looking at teachers' and students' actions and interaction. They all require practice if you want to use them successfully in the classroom. When observers can give teachers specific feedback about their work that suggest ways to grow and improve, it will indeed be like giving them another set